So this walkthrough is going to take us through two-way frequency tables, and it should maybe be a review from some stuff you learned in middle school, but if not, it should be a fairly easy concept, especially because we now know what just a frequency table is, and so we should be able to do fairly well on two-way frequency tables. So let's start up here at the top with this fill in the blank. Two-way frequency tables are visual representations that organize data showing relationships between two categorical variables. So if you notice the word almost like category, all this really means is that a two-way frequency table is a table that displays some data when we're talking about two different things. So girls and boys that like soccer or football, or let's say we're talking about ice cream flavors and toppings. So we're talking about two different categories, gender and favorite color. And so one will go along the top and one will go along the left-hand side. So this is just a very wordy mathematical way to say we're going to create a table that's talking about two different categories and then collecting some data and filling it in. There are two really important things to remember: that all of the rows should add up. So remember that rows go left to right. So all of the rows should add up, and all of the columns should add up. So columns go up and down. Okay, so let's look at an example of a frequency table. 50 students in Miss Miller's algebra class were asked what kind of ice cream they liked, vanilla or chocolate. So that's one category. And what kind of toppings they liked, sprinkles, M&Ms, or nothing. That's another category. Identify any trends in the data. So we're not going to really answer any questions on this table. I just want you to look at the table, and I want to point out a couple of things to you. So we have two categories: the type of ice cream and the topping that the people being surveyed liked. So our one category is going to show up on the left-hand side, and our other category, and actually let me write this in the same color. So our vanilla and chocolate is going to show up here, and then our sprinkles, M&Ms, or nothing is going to show up here. And so I don't know if you remember those multiplication charts where when you first started learning multiplication, you had a 1 and a 1. And if you found where the 1 and 1 connected, it told you what those two things multiplied together equals. And then if you had a 2 and a 1, if you found where those two things connected, it was 2. And a 3 and a 1 was 3. And then when we got to the 2 column, it was wherever those two boxes came together, it would tell you what those equaled. And that's kind of like a two-way frequency table. I mean, it's a lot like a two-way frequency table. It's not really data, but it's taking something along the top and something along the side, and then inserting some information where those two things come together. So if I'm looking at sprinkles and vanilla, I would look where sprinkles and vanilla come together, and that would be 9. That means that 9 people chose vanilla with sprinkles. If I'm looking at who chose chocolate with M&Ms, that's going to be where the chocolate and the M&M columns meet together. So if I put my finger on M&M and I put my finger on chocolate and I bring my fingers together, they're going to meet at this 9 column. And that just means I have 9 people that chose chocolate with M&M. One thing that I wanted to point out is that this is the total. So I want you to circle it, and I want you to put grand total. So this tells us the number of people that were surveyed, or the very total of things that were surveyed. So that bottom right corner is your grand total. And then, like I said earlier, If you had 9 plus 7, it would equal 16. And 8 plus 9, it would equal 17. And 13 plus 4 is 17. So all of those columns, they add up. Likewise, let me get rid of those. If I went the rows, 9 plus 8 plus 13 equals 30. 7 plus 9 plus 4 equals 20. And then 16 plus 17 plus 17, equals 50. So all of my rows add up and my columns add up. So that's basically a frequency table. And now you're going to see a lot of things where maybe this box isn't filled in, so you have to fill that in. So you would have to think 8 plus what equals 17. So you'll be able to fill those in. And I think that will be pretty natural, pretty easy for you. So we'll do one together here in a second. But this is a frequency table. Really 3 important things. Grand total is down here in the bottom right. Rows add up and columns add up. Okay, so you might see frequency tables represented with 2 different number representations. So the first way you might just see are integers. So just numbers, right? No fractions, no decimals, nothing weird, just basic numbers. The second way that you might see them is with decimals. And something I want to point out really quick, and I want you to write this on your paper, to change a decimal to a percent, you move the decimal 2 places to the right. So if I want to change a decimal to a percent, I move the decimal 2 places to the right. That should definitely be a review, because sometimes you might see a frequency table using decimals, but it's going to ask you a percent, and you just have to be able to take that decimal, move the decimal 2 to the right, and then you would have your percent. So that's just a good reminder on these frequency tables. So let's look at this first one. This is one where you might see just integers. To create a two-way frequency table using integers, fill the boxes in the frequency, making sure everything adds up. So you have some gaps, and the best way to start filling things in is look for 2 out of the 3 places or 3 out of the 4 places, and try to just find a row or a column where only 1 blank spot is there. So this right here has a blank spot. So if I know people who like sprinkles, I have 9 plus 17, so I know this last column is going to be 16. So that 16 is going to help me go this way. So I know 16 plus 17 plus what is going to give me 15. So I know 16 plus 17 plus 17 will give me 50. I have only 1 opening here, so I know 8 plus what is 17, and I know that that's 9. And then I have 1 opening here, so I know what plus 4 equals 17, and I know that that's 13. And so I want to make sure everything adds up, and I always check my answers before I move on. I think you guys will see frequency tables where you have to fill something in, and then you're going to have to answer some questions. So if you don't check your answer after you fill it in, and you have something filled in wrong, you're now going to be answering questions wrong. So it's a really good time, it's like a checkpoint to check your answers. 9 plus 17 plus 13, does that equal 30? Yes. Does 7 plus 9 plus 4 equal 20? Yes. And does 16 plus 17 plus 17 equals 50? Yes. And then let's just check going down. Does 9 plus 7 give us 16? Yes. 8 plus 9, 17? Yes. And 13 plus 4, 17? Yes. And then this was filled in for us, but you can see 30 plus 20 is 50. So all of our columns and all of our rows add up. So that's a frequency table with just numbers. To create a two-way frequency table using decimals, we're just going to create a fraction and then find that as a decimal. So this is the template to create a fraction. So you're basically taking the frequency, so just the number that it actually happens, and you're putting it over this grand total column down here. So our grand total in this problem that we're doing right here is 50. And so that's why you see all of these fractions having 50 on the bottom. So this table is actually the same table as the table right above it. So if you notice right here you have a 9, and right here you have a 9 over 50. Here you have an 8, 8 over 50, 30, 30 over 50. So we're just taking the integers and we're putting it over the grand total. Okay, so let's fill in these decimal frequencies. So this first section where it's vanilla and sprinkles, we know in the data from the table above that we have 9 of them, and we know that our grand total is 50. So it's 9 over 50. So 9 over 50 is 0.18. So 0.18. That is 18%. Okay, so if you want to write that underneath, that might be kind of helpful. So that's 18%. Okay, so for the next one, we have 8 over 50, and that is 0.16 or 16%. So now we have to fill in this blank one. So I have 9 and 8 plus what is going to give me 30, and I know from above it's 13. So I'm going to put 13 over 50, always over my grand total, and 13 over 50, or 13 divided by 50, is 0.26 or 26%. Now, you're not going to see the decimal and the percent. I'm just trying to show you in this that 0.26 is 26%, or 0.18 is 18%. So you'll never see the decimal and the percent in there together. And you're more than likely never going to see a percent. You probably will see a decimal and a question wanting a percent. So you're going to have to remember that you just move that decimal 2 times to the right. So now I have 30 over 50, which is the same thing as 3/5. So 30 divided by 50, and that gives us 0.6. And if you think about that, like in terms of money, there's a 0 there. So then that's going to be 60%. So then we have, now we're just going to start filling in some of these tables. So I'm going to fill in a couple more, and then I'm going to have you fill in the rest, and I want to check your work before you move on to the practice. So the next one is 7 over 50, which is 0.14 or 14%. And I'm going to do one more for you. 4 over 50 is 0.08, or move that 2 places over, 8%. So I want you to fill in these boxes on your own, and then I want to check your answer. If you want to fill in a couple and check with a classmate, make sure you're doing it right, that's fine. Or fill in a couple and check with me and make sure you're on the right track, that's perfectly fine too. But I want you to fill in all these empty boxes. And then the very last thing I want you to remember, well, and this is a good thing too, like if you look at all of your decimals, they should all also add up. So your fractions should add up, your decimals should add up, and your percentages should add up. So if you looked at 18%, 16%, and 26%, and you added those 3 together, you would get 60%. So we still have to always make sure that every row is adding up and every column is adding up. And I want you to know this vocabulary word. So this is called relative frequency. So when we are asked relative frequency, all they're asking you to do is to find the fraction and then turn it into the decimal. So that's relative frequency. So when you see a frequency table with decimals in it, that is a frequency table that has found all of the relative frequencies. So make sure you write that on your paper and make sure you just understand that's just a type of frequency is relative frequency, and that's when you have the frequency over the total turned into a decimal. That is relative frequency. That's just what it's called. So fill in these empty boxes. Let me check your answers and let me know if you have any questions. Adios.